In 2019, a small family moved into what looked like the perfect home in a quiet town in Ashford, United Kingdom. The house was beautiful, peaceful, and surprisingly cheap. At first, everything felt normal, almost too normal. But within a few nights, strange things began happening inside the house. Doors slowly opening on their own, footsteps echoing in empty hallways, and whispers in the middle of the night. What they discovered later about the house's past was far more terrifying than anything they had experienced before. And the worst part, they were not alone in that house. My name is Selim Virex, and this is a true story that happened to my family in 2019 in Ashford, United Kingdom. I was 27 years old at the time, living with my wife Aloan Drake and our 6-year-old daughter Lyra Valine. We had been searching for a new place to live for months. Our apartment in London had become too small, too noisy, and too expensive. We wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere peaceful where our daughter could grow up happily. One day, while browsing listings online, Aloan found a beautiful old house in Ashford. The photos looked incredible. It was a 2-story Victorian house with tall windows, wooden floors, and a huge backyard surrounded by old oak trees. The strange thing was the price. It was far cheaper than houses around it. At first, I thought it must be a scam. But when we contacted the real estate agent, everything seemed legitimate. A week later, we drove to Ashford to see the house in person. The moment we arrived, I felt something strange. The house looked even bigger in real life. It stood at the end of a quiet street, slightly separated from the other homes. The white paint on the walls was fading, and the wooden porch creaked slightly in the wind. But despite that, the place had a strange charm to it. The agent, a quiet man named Rowan Blythe, greeted us at the gate. He seemed nervous, constantly adjusting his glasses and avoiding eye contact. I thought maybe he was just shy. When he opened the front door, a cold draft moved through the hallway. The inside of the house smelled like old wood and dust, but it was still beautiful. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, lighting up the wooden staircase and antique furniture that had been left behind. Lyra ran through the living room excitedly, laughing as her footsteps echoed on the floor. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Aloan squeezed my hand and whispered, "This place feels magical." I nodded, even though something deep inside me felt slightly uneasy. During the tour, Rowan barely spoke. Whenever we asked questions about the house's history, he gave short answers and quickly changed the subject. Before leaving, I asked him one simple question. Why is the house so cheap? For a few seconds, Rowan didn't say anything. Then he forced a small smile and said, "The previous owners needed to sell quickly." That was it. We didn't ask further questions. 2 weeks later, we moved into the house. The first night was peaceful. The second night, things started changing. It began with small things. One evening, while I was sitting in the living room reading, I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, heavy footsteps moving across the hallway. I assumed it was Aloan. But when I looked up, she was sitting right across from me on the couch. We both heard it. Step, step, step. The sound stopped suddenly. We stared at each other in silence. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded slowly. Thinking it might be the house settling, I went upstairs to check. But when I reached the hallway, everything was completely silent. Every room was empty. The next night, something even stranger happened. Around 2:30 in the morning, Lyra suddenly started crying in her room. Aloan rushed upstairs while I followed behind her. When we entered the room, Lyra was sitting up in bed, shaking. "There's someone in the hallway," she said softly. My heart immediately started racing. I checked the hallway. There was no one there. But as I stood there, something caught my attention. At the far end of the hallway, one of the doors slowly creaked open by itself. No wind, no movement, just the sound of old wood slowly opening. That was the first moment I truly felt something was wrong with the house. But what happened 3 nights later was the moment everything changed. That night, I woke up to a sound I will never forget. Whispering. Very quiet whispering. At first, I thought it was coming from outside. But then I realized something terrifying. The whispering was coming from inside the hallway, right outside our bedroom door. And it sounded like someone was saying my name. When I heard the whisper outside our bedroom door, my entire body froze. At first, I thought I was dreaming. My eyes slowly opened, and the room was almost completely dark. The only light came from the street lamp outside, faintly shining through the curtains. Then I heard it again. A quiet whisper, barely louder than a breath. Selim. My heart started pounding in my chest. I slowly sat up in bed and looked toward the bedroom door. It was slightly open, leaving a narrow dark gap that looked out into the hallway. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the floorboards outside the room creaked. Someone, or something, was standing there. I gently got out of bed, trying not to wake Aloan. Every step I took felt heavy, like the air in the room had suddenly become thicker. When I reached the door, I slowly pushed it open. The hallway was empty, but the air felt freezing cold. A strange feeling crawled up my spine as I looked down the corridor. At the far end of the hallway was the same door that had opened by itself a few nights earlier. It was the only room we hadn't used yet. We had left it empty because the lock on the door didn't work properly. But now the door was wide open, and the darkness inside that room looked deeper than it should have been. I stood there for several seconds, staring at it. Then suddenly, slam! The door behind me shut violently. I spun around in panic. My bedroom door had closed completely on its own. At that moment, Aloan woke up inside the room and called my name nervously. Selim. What's happening? Before I could answer, something moved inside the dark room at the end of the hallway. I saw it clearly. A tall shadow slowly shifted across the wall. My blood turned cold. I rushed back into the bedroom and locked the door. Neither of us slept for the rest of the night. The next morning, we tried to convince ourselves it was just our imagination. Maybe the house was old, maybe the wood was expanding and contracting, maybe we were just stressed. But that afternoon, we decided to speak with someone who might know more about the house. We went to the nearest house across the street and knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered. Her name was Maribel Thorne. When we told her we had just moved into the old Victorian house at the end of the street, the smile on her face disappeared instantly. She went silent. Then she invited us inside. After we sat down, she looked at us with a worried expression. You should not have moved into that house, she said quietly. My stomach tightened. I asked her what she meant. She took a deep breath and began explaining something that made our skin crawl. The house we had moved into was built in the late 1800s. Over the years, many families had lived there, but none of them stayed long. According to Maribel, strange things had been happening in that house for decades. Footsteps at night, doors opening, voices whispering in empty rooms. But the most disturbing part of the story happened in 1993. A family lived there with their young son. One night, the boy told his parents that a tall man in the hallway had been talking to him every night. At first, they thought he had an imaginary friend. But weeks later, the boy was found standing in the hallway at 3 a.m., talking to someone no one else could see. A few days later, the family suddenly moved away and abandoned the house. No one ever found out exactly what happened. After hearing all this, Aloan and I looked at each other in complete shock. Because Lyra had said the exact same thing. There's someone in the hallway. That night, we decided to keep Lyra in our bedroom. We thought if we stayed together, maybe nothing would happen. But around 3:07 a.m., the most terrifying moment of our lives began. We were all asleep when a loud thud echoed from the hallway. Then another. Then slow footsteps. Tap, tap, tap. Moving toward our bedroom door. Lyra woke up and squeezed Eloan's arm. "Mom, he's here again," she whispered. My heart nearly stopped. The footsteps stopped right outside our door. For several seconds, there was complete silence. Then the doorknob slowly started turning. But the door was locked. The handle kept twisting again and again. Then suddenly, 3 loud knocks. Knock, knock, knock. And then the whisper returned. But this time, it wasn't saying my name. It said something far worse. "Let me in." That was the moment we knew we couldn't stay in that house anymore. The next morning, we packed everything we could and left. We didn't even wait to sell the house. We simply walked away from it. Even now, years later, I still think about that hallway and that voice outside the door. Because sometimes late at night, when the house I live in now becomes very quiet, I feel like I hear footsteps again. And sometimes, I think I hear someone whisper my name. If you enjoyed this true horror story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real scary experiences, paranormal encounters, and dark stories. Your support helps bring more chilling stories like this to life. Also, if you have ever experienced something strange, paranormal, or unexplained in your home, share your experience in the comment section. Many people have stories that sound unbelievable until someone else has experienced the same thing. And if you know someone who loves true scary stories, make sure to share this video with them. Because sometimes the scariest stories are not from movies. They are true.